Morning, sunshines. Excellent. So we made it past the auditions. Congratulations, got the show cast. Everybody's very excited, right? We're all here, first day of rehearsal. Yay. But you still got a job to do. There's gonna be a lot of energy, a lot of people, a lot of hugging, kissing, all that sort of stuff, unless you're in COVID, in which case there's social distancing and you're on Zoom. But there still are some things that you have to do. The first, and all of these fall into three basic categories. Everything we're gonna talk about today. One is that you need to do whatever you need to do to expedite rehearsals. Make sure that the people are there on time, that the directors figured out what their intent for the rehearsal is, that the intent is actually carried out, that they have pads of paper or chairs or tables or spiking or whatever they need in order to carry out that day's rehearsal. It needs to all be prepared ahead of time. Again, there are always going to be little things that pop up at the last moment you will have to jump through hoops to try and get those things accomplished quickly. But the first and the major thing you're there is to expedite rehearsals. The second thing is to relieve the director of any technical concerns. What I mean by that is that they need to know that you're taking down the notes to send to all the different departments about props that may have been added or cut, or costumes that may have been discussed, like we need a pocket for a watch here, which is both props and costumes, unless the costume designer has told you specifically they're handling watches and things like that. Personal props, again, in production meetings, things like canes, glasses, watches, things that people wear, but they're also props. Sometimes costume designers will say, I will handle this. Sometimes the costume designer will say, let that be a prop, or at least initially until they figure out that that's something they need to have an opinion on. But you need to make sure that the director knows that anything that comes up technically, any kind of note about a lamp that turns on, or lights in refrigerators, or whatever the note may be, that you're taking it down and you're making sure that the other departments have them. Because again, once you get into the rehearsal, even though at the first rehearsal, you're probably going to have the set designer and the costume designer and the lighting designer attending that rehearsal. They may not even stay through the entire read-through if you're going to have a read-through the first rehearsal. So they may just present their designs and then leave. And so they will not be there to know the things that have been changed or altered. And again, it's still request. Anytime you have a change that occurs, it still needs to be a discussion. And again, this is the third thing. You need to stay out of the artistic interpretation. Anything that the director says, oh, we got to have this. All right, you may not have to have. The director needs to talk to the set designer or the costume designer or the lighting designer about an issue, but just because the director says we gotta have doesn't mean that the other designer can't discuss and convince the director that gotta means we don't need it. All right, so you don't need to be stuck in between that. Now you need to open the avenue so that people in sets, lights, costumes, etc. are aware, that the issue exists and the director is changing their understanding or their interpretation or whatever that might be, but it's not your job to side with one or the other. Because again, as soon as you start siding with the director and the designer wins, then you're on the wrong side of the table, and vice versa. So you let the director say must have, you interpret that through the lens of can we, may we, and so that the design team knows the issue needs to be discussed. And at the next production meeting, if it's something that can wait that long, or the next day, if it's something that can't wait that long, that can be discussed and the decision can be made. But it's not your job to make those decisions. It's your job to understand why the decisions were made. Yes, so that as people change and as the show continues to grow, when you look back and people come in, and again, let's say you have somebody who is ill, who missed the first couple rehearsals or whatever. Yes. Then they come in, you can say, these are things, this is where we're headed, these are the choices that have been made, and why, okay? So you need to be a part of the decision, but you are not the decider, yes? Okay, so those are the three basic things. Expedite rehearsal, relieve the director of artistic, or the technical concerns, and to make sure that you're not there to interpret the play, you are there to make sure the interpretation is happening. You're the conduit, yes? So those are, again, the three basic categories through which all of this flows. Now, Again, last time we have discussed that there are 4 phases of production. You have pre-production, then you have auditions, then you have what's called the rehearsal phase or the staging phase, the first part of rehearsal. Then you have the technical rehearsal period, and then you have the performance part of the play. In the rehearsal, the second phase of production, there are also 4 different sort of types of rehearsals that you'll have. The first is what I'm going to call table work. It's character development. It's where the actors and the director sit down and just discuss things as simple as pronunciation of words, especially if you're doing an accent. You may have just entire rehearsals that are nothing but accent rehearsals with a voice coach, vocal coach. Again, if you're not doing accents or not doing things, you still may have words that people don't understand how to say appropriately, and so you'll have discussions about that. But that's all done at table work. We'll talk more about that in a second. Then, as you start putting the show on its feet, you have blocking rehearsals. Eventually, you're going to get to the point where people can start putting the book down. You'll have what I call pacing rehearsals, where you actually have the show running in some semblance of the real time. See, the pacing and the final step is what I call polishing, where you're just taking very fine-tuned notes about where fingers are pointing or eyes are looking, and things that are very small and minute changes to polishing the show, to making sure the character is through and through the character. So again, you start with just the development of how these people are different from the actor playing the character and how they're the same. Then you start standing the show up and how these people move about the stage. Then you start moving into the timing it takes for things to happen, where pauses can go, where rhythms can alter, and then finally you're to the point where you have gestures and things that are added, and particular details are added to the play. And again, that gets you through the rehearsal phase up to the tech rehearsal phase. So that's, again, the 4 parts of the rehearsal phase. What you're going to do during rehearsals, you're going to call things like lights up, you're going to call things like blackout or fade or whatever it is. So you'll call the cueing of the show. Now, nothing happens in the show. You may say things like phone, ring, ring, lightning, thunder, whatever it is. You're going to announce those, just say them out loud. You may be lucky enough to have recorded on your phone or in a little CD, a little package those sound designer may give you that you can play along with, but that even doesn't usually come till later. So usually you'll just announce those sort of things. You're going to take the blocking, obviously. We'll talk more about that in a second. You're going to prompt the actors. At some point in this phase, the actors are going to have to put their books down. And it's amazing to me how sometimes it's not even putting the book down. They can literally have the book in their hand and they're reading the line, and they will invert things, yes? And so your eye needs to be on the script, or your assistant stage manager needs to be in the script. So if fumbles happen, they say the wrong word, put in the wrong order, whatever it is, you point it out as soon as possible, because the worst thing to have happen is have an actor learn it the wrong way. It'd be like saying to not be or to be. That's totally wrong, although it is all the right words. But it happens. People misinterpret, misread lines all the time. So again, you're prompting actors. You're warning of upcoming moments. In other words, a lot of times actors are going to be, you're going to have several actors at the rehearsal, and you're only dealing with a couple of them at a time. And so you may have a waiting room like the green room or other places for other actors to congregate, so it's not causing interruptions in what's going on stage. And so you need to make sure that as you're getting to the place where those other actors are needed, they're not having to stop to go find the actors, that those actors are there, 5-10 minutes before they have to get on stage. Send an assistant stage manager, or you yourself run and find the actors, so let them know they have 10 minutes or 5 minutes to be on stage. Again, it all depends on how the system works at your theater you're working at. Maintain order. At some point, hopefully very early on, you have made a running order of the show, written down Act 1, Scene 1, obviously the opening of the play, but there may be a prologue or something. But write down, who's in the scene, maybe, what the running order is, especially if you've got a musical where you have musical numbers that then you can then post on the call board. Most theaters have a place in the theater called the call board, where announcements go, where things like fittings are posted, where the sign-in sheet will be. You are in charge of the call board. You need to organize it and make it look like what you want it to be. Announcements, get your headshots taken, bring in your form that answers for your bio, whatever announcements you need to have, all that needs to be posted on the call board so that actors come in to sign in, they can also see all the notices. There's also, if it's an equity show, there are equity rules that have to be posted on these call boards, and the equity will give you a packet of that information to send to you. But again, that's a whole different can of wax if you're doing an equity show. You need a spike set. We're going to talk a little bit here in a second about ways of spiking a set. And again, you may need to spike the furniture. It may need to, as rehearsals happen, again, one of the things that happens is that directors find they don't have enough room between the couch and the table, or the table and the chair, or the table and the wall, and so they may alter the placement. If it's just a couple inches there, a couple inches there, I wouldn't make it a big point about telling anybody, especially early on in rehearsal. But if it's changing from one side of the stage to the other, again, that's something that you need to discuss with the director, with the designers, as to why it was on the other side of the stage. It may not be important, or maybe that there's a reason why it was placed over there that's very important. I mean, again, at AUM, the dressing rooms for the actors is stage right. And so most entrances or exits that involves large numbers of people are stage right. Doesn't mean we can't have exits stage left, but again, it interrupts the flow of the show, because if a character exits stage left, then the actor has to work themselves all the way around the stage back to house right or stage right to get to the green room, and that could cause problems, especially if you've got 10 people that are suddenly trampling around backstage. So again, just as things get moved, you may need to respike things. You need to keep an accurate time of rehearsals. A stopwatch is a necessity. You've got to have a stopwatch, and the nice thing about your phone here, it's got a stopwatch feature on it, so that's a nice thing to have. And again, each rehearsal should generate a rehearsal report, and even if there are no notes from that rehearsal report to the costumes, for instance, it's important that you tell the costumes that there are no notes, so the costume designer knows that they haven't missed anything. Especially if there is a note, though, you need to make sure that you're keeping track of whatever the notes are. And things like a character gets down on their hands and knees and crawls on the floor. It may not seem like it's a costume note, but it's a costume note, because those costumes have got to be able to withstand every night crawling around on the floor. Yes, the actor may need knee pads. Then of course you have to change the size of the pants or the dress or whatever it is to fit over the knee pads, right? And so it may not seem important to you, but as you're staging the show, when people do actions that are not typical, they suddenly do jumping jacks. Can somebody do jumping jacks in their costume? Again, it doesn't necessarily change the costume, but it may change the action once they've got the actual costume on. Yes. So again, example of you sending the rehearsal report. All right, first rehearsal. There's a lot of things. There's a welcome. Everybody, welcome here. Show them where the sign-in sheet is. A lot of times you're going to have pre-made a contact sheet. You need to make sure that you pass it around and have everybody initialed their name and their phone numbers and their emails so that you know that they are correct. We'll make whatever changes they need to make to the form, because again, a lot of times in auditions, you've been handed a handwritten form, and people's handwriting ability being what it is often that you have misunderstood an M for an N or whatever it is, so you need to make sure everything is correct. If there are people getting paid, they need to sign or fill out a W-4 or W-9. If you're equity, you've got to fill out all kind of Blue Cross, Blue Shield, welfare forms. They've got a whole packet of information. If you've got to do things like that. An equity member, again, equity is the actors union. Sometimes actors will have already signed their contracts, but in a lot of cases, and I would say to the point of most cases, actors haven't yet signed their contract, because if they haven't signed their contract and a better offer comes around, they can take the better offer without having to deal with getting out of the contract they're in. They can just call and say, I haven't signed it, and so I need to go do this. So a lot of times the very first thing that happens at the first rehearsal is anybody that's getting paid equity has to sit down and sign the contract with the producer. That's before any of this other stuff that we're talking about happens. Yes, so sign contracts. Then once the equity members are there, the first thing that the equity members have to do is meet separately, and they have to choose what's called a deputy. The deputy is the equity person's liaison between the equity members of the acting company and management. If they have an issue, pays not being right, rent not being paid, bathroom, bedroom, whatever things they have problems with, it is not you they go through, it is through their deputy. Now, until they elect, let's say you have an equity cast member who's late to rehearsal, you can go ahead and fill out the contracts and all that other stuff, start rehearsals, and then once all the members of the equity, or at least a quorum of the equity members are there, then they can go meet the deputy. So you will be the deputy until a deputy is elected. But usually there's not a huge issue if they're just signing the contract between that moment and the election of the deputy. But if there is, for some reason, welcome to equity stage management. You're going to have to hand out rehearsal schedules. You're going to have to hand out scripts. Again, in most instances, scripts are going to be given to actors. In some instances, especially in musical theater, you're going to have to assign scripts to actors. Let them know, please, to write in pencil, because your job at the end of it and your crew's job at the end of the rehearsal, or the end of the performance, is to send those scripts back, especially musicals, to MTI. They require them back. That's just a rental of the script. Some scripts, again, from Samuel French, they're $4 a piece. Most theaters just buy them and we hand them out. But again, some theaters are like, the theater bought it, it's theater property. Even though you hand it to the actor at the end of the performance, the actor is supposed to hand it back to you. So you might want to keep a list of who has what script number. And that's also good, just in general, just have a list of those, give every script a number, 1 through 20, and then hand them out. And as you hand them out, Cody's got script number 9. And that way at the end of rehearsal, you got a script laying out there, script number 9, at least you know it's Cody's, right? So again, there are nice little things, reasons to know who has what script. Especially on touring shows, you need to hand out itineraries, when you'll be in what cities, contact information, mailing information, so people need to have their bills mailed to certain places that can know where to go. You might even have a packet of points of interest as you're traveling around on tours, that sort of stuff, so people know what they can look out for. Any kind of biographical information that people need for programs, that sort of stuff, you may have to hand out forms. Occasionally, those people will be there, the marketing people will be there. They may show the marketing campaign, they may explain about comp tickets. There may be a whole bunch of things, so you may need to call on those people to have those things explained. Again, even in some community theaters, a lot of times I like to have news articles about particular people, and so the press agent for this theater may come to rehearsal and say, okay, is there something that anybody here, does anybody work at a local high school or something that might be a tag to the community, so that we can have a news article about the local high school teacher that's in the show or something. That's just an example. I'm not saying it's the best one, but just an example of something that might happen. Again, you're going to have introductions of the cast and crew. Just have anybody who's there. You probably will have your stage managers, assistant stage managers, things like light board operators, soundboard operators. You probably won't have, but in my world, everybody's welcome at all rehearsals. But in most theaters, you're not going to have all the crew members at the rehearsal. You'll have the stage management staff. You'll have the design team to make their design presentations. You'll have the actors. You may have a producer who may do a welcoming speech. And how happy they are that they're there working for them for the summer or for whatever. We talked about deputies, warm-ups. One of the things about actors, before they get into physically walking around the stage or vocally projecting around the stage, a lot of times they'll need a little 10-minute, 15-minute, who knows what kind of warm-up. So again, that's your pulse. Before you get into any kind of read-through or any kind of standing up and walking around, especially if you've got dance choreography happening or singing happening, a good 15-minute break to give people a time to get some water or go to the bathroom and do a little warm-up would probably be appropriate. Again, a lot of musicals, you're going to go straight from the first introduction meeting straight into learning the music of the show, as opposed to, or the choreography of the show, as opposed to read-throughs. Some directors find read-throughs superfluous. The actor doesn't, it's just a waste of time. If you've got the time in the rehearsal period, I find it enlightening so that everybody knows the running order without having to just read a dry piece of paper. Again, if you're doing summer stock, most of the actors will have been familiar and have already learned their part before they arrive. If you're doing theater at a college, probably nobody's read the script at all before you walk in for a rehearsal. Especially if it's a new script, that just changes this there. So that sort of thing. All right, so you're going to have designers. Well, again, you're going to have your list of rules that I would go over. One of the major ones, again, I would stress that the actor, if the actor is called at 7 o'clock, they need to be there by 6:45, or you'll start making calls. Unless they have contacted you and said, I'm running a little late. But the actor is called us 15 minutes before the call. That way they have time to put their stuff down, be prepared. If there's a stop, if they're stuck at a stoplight, they're not late, they're just late for their 15-minute call, right? So I would just make that one of my standing rules, is that if you're called at 7, you're here at 6:45. If you're called at 8:30, you're here at 8:15. That gives me time to alert you that you're running late. And there are people that will be there an hour before, right? And there are people that won't be there 15 minutes after every time, so you just make those people's calls an hour until they can prove they can be there at that point, and then you can shorten it up, yes? All right, the designers are gonna be at the first rehearsal usually to make a design presentation. Again, there's not necessarily anything saying that the set designer goes first, but typically the set designer will have a model maybe, or sketches, or ground plan that they can pass around to let the actors know physically what the environment is like, where there's any levels, where there's any stairs, where there are any steps, where the furniture is, etc., that they may have to worry about. Then the costume designer will go and have their renderings they pass around, so that individual actors can sort of see what their look is going to be. Again, how to put this, actors will sometimes feel that they have a right to an opinion, especially about some clothes that they may wear, or some design that's there. This is not the time to discuss those issues. This is merely the time for you to see, and again, this is one of those things where you have to have a sharp eye. As somebody grabs their picture of their rendering, if they go, oh great, does that really mean great, or is that just a good actor? Or if they suddenly start frowning and curling up, and going, just make a note of it so that later you can say, what was it about your rendering that you didn't like? And it's like, well, I was just thinking about it. All right, well, they just think in very weird ways. And sometimes they have problems. So that you know that they need to talk to the costume designer, who needs to talk to the director to figure out what the solution to the problem is, yes? If an actor has to appear in limited apparel, if actors have to be intimate with one another, if an actor has to smoke on stage, I would have made all of those things a part of the audition information. For instance, if there's a character in Noise Is Off who runs around the entire show in her underwear and a little teddy, if an actor doesn't feel comfortable running around in a teddy, you probably shouldn't have cast that actor, because this actor is very important to the script and everybody refers to it continually the whole time. So that needs to be something that had to be addressed before the first rehearsal. So making an announcement to the cast as they're standing there at the first audition saying, listen, I'm just letting you know, have the director make the announcement, or you make the announcement, this character in this show is scantily clad. If you have a problem with that, you need to let us know that you don't want to be auditioning for that role. But that's better to be handled at auditions than it would be at first rehearsal. We'll talk about intimate scenes later. So once you get through the design presentation, again, let's talk about this. One of the things you might have had to do before the rehearsal is actually lay out the floor plan to actually tape the floor. So here's a little 5-minute video, believe it or not, they can talk about it for 5 minutes. But here's a little video about how to tape a floor. Boy, is this exciting.
A big part of stage managing is showing the actors and the other crew members that they're in good hands. You don't want anyone spending any energy wondering if you're up to your job as a stage manager. You want to make it possible for them to concentrate on their responsibilities and not worry about you. You can allow them to focus on their duties and their art by showing them right off the bat that you have stage management covered. And one of the first things they will see from you is the tape job on the floor. As a stage manager, it's one of your more important duties in the time before rehearsal, commonly called prep week. It's important for several reasons. The first being it's the only full-scale representation of the set the actors will see until they move on stage, and also because it's often the first thing from your hands that the actors see. Of all the prep week duties, taping the floor is one of the more time-consuming and tedious chores. Doing it right takes preparation, a few materials, and some of your time. Most theater companies have the ground plan available to you at least 1 week before the first rehearsal. It's much easier to tape the floor before you begin rehearsals. Once you're in rehearsal, your time will be eaten up rather quickly. Once the design is on paper, it's transferred to a three-dimensional model so that everyone can visualize the designer's concept. I like to grid the ground plan. I draw a line parallel to the center line every 10 feet using an architect's rule. I also use either an existing line on the drawing or draw one in myself that runs perpendicular to the center line, running stage left to stage right. Take your time with these. You'll be using them to measure from, so if these lines are off, then everything about your tape will be off. Let's get started out by taking the ground plan and identify every major point, not line, but point. Where a wall ends, where the door is, where the corner of the room is, where the platform ends. Start on either stage left or stage right. For the sake of this demo, I'll start on the stage right. Give each point on the stage right side a number on the ground plan. It's best to start on the downstage side, then work your way upstage as you measure, because this is the order you will eventually lay them out. If you move downstage to upstage, you'll waste less movement. Now, on the ground plan, measure how far upstage by how far stage right. Once you have measured and listed all the coordinates for the stage right side, do the stage left side. After you have finished the stage left side, you should have two good-sized list of coordinates. Start on one side of the stage and number all the coordinates all the way down the page, then continue the numbering down the other column. Now you're ready to tape the floor. First, sweep and mop. It's difficult for the tape to stick if the floor is dirty. The tools you'll need for the actual taping include 3 tape measures at least 25 feet long and the tape itself. I prefer the cloth back type. It sticks well and comes in an assortment of colors. Some places use masking tape, which works well until you have to pull it up. I've also seen some theaters use electrical tape that comes in several colors as well. This process works best if you have 3 people involved, but you can do it with 2. First, lay one tape measure out 0 feet 0 inches all the way up the center line and tape it to the floor. You won't need much tape, just a tab every 10 feet usually does it. Then be very careful not to kick or step on the tape. They break easily and you don't want it to move. If you're doing stage right first, lay a second tape measure exactly 10 feet to the right of the first tape measure. This second tape measure makes sure that when you measure from center, you don't have to guess at making right angles. Once your tape measures are taped down to the floor, you're ready to put some tabs of tape on the floor. One of you will call out the distance upstage.
Upstage, 2 feet, 3 inches.
And the other 2, one on center and the other stage right, move the third tape to the distance called out. The person on center holds the third tape measure to the middle of the center line. The person with the list of coordinates calls out how far stage right of center the point is.
Stage right, 5 feet, 7 inches.
Then you measure from center stage to stage right. Make sure your tape measure is on the 2 foot, 3 inches, both on the center line tape and the tape that's 10 feet stage right of center. Once you find where 5 feet 7 inches is, place a small square of tape on the point with the same number as the point on the ground plan. Once you have finished stage right, pull up the tape measure that's 10 feet from center and lay it down 10 feet left of center on the stage left side, and repeat the process for the stage left side. When you get to this point, you will have a rehearsal hall full of tabs of tape with numbers. Now it's time to connect the dots. Using the ground plan as a guide, connect all the dots you have plotted on the ground plan. completed taping will look something like this. If you're using platforms, you'll want to...
I told you it's exciting. You might want to go through what the tape on the floor means with the actors so that they can understand where there's a level, where there's a step, where there's an entrance, where there's an exit, where windows are or where fireplaces are, whatever the tape on the floor means. Go over with the actors so that they understand what's what and where's where. And even if you don't have the actual furniture for the show, at least have some sort of stand-in furniture so that you can know where approximately the furniture is going to be, even though it may not be the exact furniture. One of the things you should have discussed with the director beforehand is how they want to handle breaks. Again, the equity rule is that for every hour of rehearsal you have 5-minute break, or you can go to an hour and a half and then have a 10-minute break. But again, this goes back to timing the rehearsal with your stopwatch. An hour in the rehearsal, you need to say to the director about, 5 minutes before, say you've got 5 minutes to break. And if they decide, well, can we go till an hour and a half, that's their call. It's their rehearsal. But once you get to the break, you just say, sir, we're on break, or ma'am, we're on break, and then tell the cast 10 minutes. And just as a habit, I would make sure the actors say thank you 5 or thank you 10, just so you know that they've heard the right amount of time. And again, it shouldn't be, I sit in the audience for 4 minutes and then go pee. When you've got a 5-minute break, you need to go pee, or whatever, go get a drink of water, or whatever it is. The actor shouldn't just, again, let's talk about smoking very quickly. There are people who smoke. Some theaters have a designated smoking area. At AUM, this is a non-smoking campus. In either event, actors should never smoke in their costume or eat in their costume unless they are on stage and they are performing that as part of the action of the play. Yes, you should. People who have needs like that need to have like a robe or a bib that they can put on, a towel they can put on over the top of their costumes, but just that's a general thing in the future to deal with. All right, let's talk about actors for a second. Again, this is not an acting class, but one of the things you need to understand is these beasts that you're working with. Oftentimes, if you're in community theater, you have people who have no training. Great. They have no preconceived notions of how to develop character. They've not been told how to what their rights are, and you can treat them any way you want. Don't treat them nice. But a lot of actors have spent a lot of time paying lots of dollars for money to learn from people who have done acting for years. And over time, there have been several different approaches to acting to help to enliven character interpretations. I think that's being a nice way of putting it. We're just going to go back to Stanislavski. In Russia, at the end of the 19th, beginning of the 20th century, there was this man named Konstantin Stanislavski who developed a psychological approach to character development. In other words, he would have his actors, and he was an actor. He would look at the script and he would figure out the subplot, the background of these characters. So even though these characters were just written on a page, they didn't have real lives, he would encourage his actors to flush those lives out to figure out what experiences have shaped these characters. It's a psychological approach using Freudian theory at the time. Were they mistreated by their parents? Did they not have enough love? What has caused them to be who they are? The idea of lying came about with Stanislavski, about characters lying about themselves and others lying about characters. So deciding what was a lie, what was the truth was very important to Stanislavski. Oftentimes this approach has been called the method. Yes, it's a method approach. It's actually a man named Lee Strasberg who went to the Moscow Art Theater in Russia in the 20s and studied under Stanislavski. And he is the one who developed what most Americans call the method when he came back to America. Now, if you've ever seen The Godfather 2, Lee Strasberg plays the Jewish gangster who lives in Cuba. Simon, I'm not gonna remember. But that's who Lee Strasberg is. Anyway, he was a very good actor himself. One of the things about his approach, he liked to have what he called the emotional memory. He liked to have actors relate back to their own past when they may have experienced their first love, or somebody, beating them up, or whatever it is, whatever time in the actor's history that was similar to the action that they're having to have on stage. He would ask them to go back and have that emotional memory and use that emotional memory to inform their performance on stage. Yes, that would, again, this is touching the surface of all these techniques. We ain't got time. Some of this stuff is years of training. But that was the basic difference between Strasberg's approach to the method that I would say he added to what Stanislavski had already developed. There's also this woman named Stella Adler who disagreed with emotional memory. She looked more for character and circumstances. If you were, this is some more imagine if you were. Let's say you were, you are who you are, and imagine you walk into a bank and there's a bank robbery, how would you react? The problem with that, of course, is that you can imagine how you think you would react, and then there's how you actually would react. So you have to go through a lot of what's called role playing in Stella Adler approach. A lot of this leads to what's called organic acting, where instead of directors guiding you, it is more the emotion of the moment. The problem with that, it's unfair to the other actors around you. Now, in life, the other people around you can't necessarily predict what you're going to say. But in a play, you're not in life, you're telling a story. And if you're telling a story, the other actors on stage have to be able to respect and understand where you're coming from so that they can change their character interpretation in order for the story to be told. If you're just off on your own whim at every moment, like you are in life, oftentimes the subject matter gets lost and the focus of the story wanders. So again, there's been a lot of architectural development about how to tell the story, and that's where the consistent performance comes to vogue. You've got to be able to do what you do as an actor over and over and over again, and so at some point organic acting has to lead to a performance that is consistent. Yes, but especially early on, organic acting can lead to discoveries of character, can lead to discoveries of gesture, can lead to discoveries of stance, of attitude, all those sort of things. So again, there are time and place for all these developments. Here's a little, we'll talk just a little bit about Meisner. Stanford Meisner is another man who developed a system of reacting. He felt like, and again, a Meisner technique would be to have the exact same sentence, and then you just say it back and forth to each other, but every time you say it back and forth to each other, you change the meaning, right? It would, in Princess Bride, when he says, "as you wish," for instance, what he's saying is, "I love you." Yes, but he says, "as you wish," right? And so that's an example of a Meisner technique. You say the words that were intended to be said, but you have an underlying meaning that expresses the way what the character's real attitude toward the situation may be. Again, it's a way of exploring character, about exploring dialogue, all that sort of stuff. Anyway, here's a little bit of video of the different techniques and what method acting is.
Hello, welcome to Organic Acting. I'm Chris Conway, and this is Method Acting Techniques. In this video, I'm going to break down method acting because I know it's quite confusing to some people. Be sure to stay tuned to the end of the video where I'll break down what is method acting. So when we're talking about method acting, we've really got to mention Konstantin Stanislavski, who is kind of the godfather of all this. If you haven't checked out my previous video on Stanislavski, I'll link it below. Be sure to check it out because it gives you more background about him and his system. So Stanislavski was looking for a more direct path to naturalistic emotion and real life organic moments on stage, as it was at the time. After Stanislavski became successful with the Moscow Arts Theatre, a lot of his techniques slowly started to bleed into America. So here you had practitioners and directors like Lee Strasberg, and Stella Adler and Sanford Meisner, taking elements of his system and making them their own. Now, Stanislavski always said that his system wasn't a cookbook. It wasn't something that you take ingredients from. It should be a complete package. But they took what worked for them and developed them into their own system, really. And this is where method acting becomes a little bit confusing, because there are these different practitioners using different elements. The term method becomes a bit muddled. So first off, we've got Lee Strasberg. He really said that the original system and concentrating so much on the text would block an actor from getting to this emotion. He wanted an even more direct route. So he said that an actor should use their own personal life to find these moments, using things like emotion memory. Again, moving away from the character slightly, but using what was at hand for the actor to get to that place. Stella Adler, on the other hand, was a little bit more faithful to Stanislavski, and that she said that a character and the given circumstances should be the thing that an actor should really concentrate on. They are the meat and potatoes of finding real emotion. Sanford Meisner believed that an actor should concentrate on the moment, on their environment, should be responding to the actors around them, and that should be the emphasis. So what does all this mean? What am I getting at here? Basically, method acting is so similar to Stanislavski's method in that actors are trying to find something real. They're not pretending, they're trying to experience. That's the similarity to Stanislavski. The difference is that method is kind of pulled apart the system. But what you need to remember is that method acting was really applied when it came to film acting. Film being very different to stage acting. In film acting, you are looking to discover a moment instantaneously. So for example, you might be shooting one of the scenes at the end of the script, right at the beginning of the shoot, and you don't have that time as you would in a play to find that emotion, to build up to it. And this is why method acting can help with that. So bearing in mind all these different ways of working within method, so Lee Strasberg, Stella Adler, Sanford Meisner, we have examples of some of the greats using method acting. We've got Robert De Niro in Taxi Driver. This is an actor who actually got his cab driver's license and drove around New York picking up fares. He's putting himself in the character's given circumstances, and he's using those given circumstances to experience and to create something that's going to be so real on camera, and it works. We've got other examples such as William Friedkin, who directed The Exorcist. This is a director who was rumoured to be using shotgun blasts during a take to create reactions from some of his actors.
That's really what pissed me off. And I told him, I said, never do that again. You know, I'm an actor. I don't need all these artificial stimulants. And he shot his shotgun this close to my head.
Here's another example. In The Godfather, Marlon Brando was rumoured to have taped a piece of paper onto his tongue with a rude message on it. Then, during the reverse, he stuck out his tongue, and the other actor was surprised by this.
Don Corleone, I am honored and grateful that you have invited me to your daughter's wedding. On the day of your daughter's wedding.
A real moment. So there we go. There's some examples from method acting. Method acting is helping these actors to create something real for the audience. There's different ways of working within the method, and perhaps some of them aren't quite as true to Stanislavski, but they work. method acting helps create something more visceral for the audience. So, we got there. That was method acting in a nutshell. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you got something out of it. If you did, be sure to like and...
Hopefully that helps. If not, like I said, just understand that the actors, some actors who've had some training may have that approach to their technique. Again, another different technique is Linklater. Linklater is an approach where you train the body and the voice and the breathing system. It's much more physical for the actor. They tend to have to warm up their bodies and to make sure they can have a wide range of motion, all that sort of stuff. Anyway, here's a brief summary of Linklater.
So voice and speech training here is based on Kristin Linklater's work. Kristin Linklater developed a series of exercises that we're going to call the progression, which is an organic series of exercises designed to liberate the body from physical tensions, but it also deals with the psychophysiological tensions that exist in the muscles, in the breathing, and to liberate the voice and the breath, which is the conduit of the voice, so that it can faithfully, truthfully serve the actor's expression.
And another approach is what's called Suzuki technique. Suzuki technique is very much into finding the core of the actor, of the character, how they stand, where they're how strong or how weak they are. Again, here's way more than you ever need to know about Suzuki.
Oh, splendor of sunburst breaking forth this day. Where I lay my hands once more on having my wife. And yet it is not so much as men think, for the woman's sake I came to Troy. But against that next rude treacherous, who like a robber carried the woman from my house.
My name is Stephanie Courtney, and I teach Viewpoints and Suzuki work here in Ireland at the Gaiety School. I also teach in California, and I started training with Suzuki 25 years ago, not with Tadashi Suzuki, but in the methodology about 25 years ago. So I've been doing this for 25 years. Movement class involves just the physicality of the actor. We do Viewpoints and Suzuki in the movement classes, but we also do some Laban work. And then I also do work in realism where, the actor's body should tell me everything I need to know about the character, time of day, place, all of that. So that's what I pull out of the actor, is I should be able to tell everything without you having to utter a word. I actually have students that I taught 15, 20 years ago that still get in touch with me that say to me, I would not be able to live the life that I'm living now or do what I do now had I not taken a Suzuki class. Because what Suzuki's work does is it puts the crisis is between your brain and the body overcoming that and actually being able to come into its own strength and endurance, which in a lot of cases is quite limitless. What it really does is that, yes, it strengthens the body and there's all of that kind of stuff, but what it does most efficiently and best is it strengthens the actor's will. It puts the actor in the physical confrontation of, if I give up, I lose. I have to keep fighting, I have to win. And the Viewpoints work I've come to realize is really about being very open to external stimulus and being able to play with the external of what's going on, being connected to the room and time and space outside of our thoughts about the room and time and space. The thing about Suzuki actors are Suzuki actors can stand on stage in absolute stillness and completely captivate the audience. They don't have to do anything. And so Suzuki work gets us out of the sort of the tomb or the prison of our minds and what we think about things, and allows our body to find its strength and endurance. And it does, I do push my students, and I do push actors beyond, well beyond the point where they think that they're capable of. And when they find out, oh, that they are capable of that, it actually releases a whole new level of capability in a lot of ways. So that's my big pitch for Suzuki.
I told you this morning you want to know about Suzuki. Anyway, all these are techniques that actors have been trained in, and so understanding what the actors' approaches may be, especially when they're warming up, etc. Again, it can be fun to watch, but it can be a very important thing for each of them to go through because that's the way they have been trained. Another approach we talked about is what's called improvisation. Improvisation, again, directors will find that sometimes having these different tacks or ways of opening actors up to freeing them from themselves and finding the character within themselves. Improvisation is not worried about the words so much as the situation, which the problem with that can lead to ad-libs. Now, let's talk about ad-libs. Ad-libs are saying something similar to the line, but not the actual line. Again, depending upon what your director's attitude towards ad-libbing is, you might start calling them early on ad-libs, actors early on ad-libs, or it may be that you let it pass until they put their, especially until they put their script down. And then when they start making mistakes, they start repeating the wrong line, or wrong order, wrong word, yes? You let them know, because a lot of times, again, you don't know as an actor what you're doing as far as what the script is, yes? Now, occasionally, there's something that comes around and the director will say, yes, we're gonna make this a change. But again, technically, you're not supposed to do that. It's a copyrighted piece. If you're doing Shakespeare, you can do whatever you want. Again, hopefully you've had fittings or your schedule for your fittings, your costume designer worked out. A dress parade is a rehearsal where the actors are going to wear their clothes on the stage in the light and move about the stage. Some directors find this incredibly insightful. Some of them think it's a waste of time. So very early on, the reason I mention it here, we'll talk more about it later. The reason I mention it here is because very early on, you need to have a discussion in the production meetings about whether or not you're actually going to hold a dress parade. Most costume designers love them. However, they're wearing modern dress and it doesn't really change the way people move about. A lot of costume designers find that having to have the costumes ready 4 or 5 days earlier is just a schedule stress they would not need. So again, that's something that you can discuss on a per show basis. Cool. All right. One thing we're going to talk. Last thing we're talking about today: understudies. Here's a little video about the life of an understudy.
I play one part in the ensemble every show, and I am the understudy for Glinda. An understudy goes on for a principal role if they can't do it for whatever reason, like they're sick or on vacation or injured. And here at Wicked, it's a little different because Glinda and Elphaba, the two leading ladies, have a standby. So the standby also needs to be out for me to be Glinda. I was out of the show for 9 months having this baby. This is Georgia, and she is 6 months old now. But I was out of the show for 6 months, and I tried to run the show right before I came back in my apartment, just with the recording, sort of thinking about what I did next, and I couldn't remember anything, and I was terrified. And I came back, and I said, I'm not going to remember anything. But then I physically did the show in the rehearsal space and on the stage, and my body remembered what I was supposed to do really quickly. It was kind of amazing. I play a lot of little parts in the ensemble, like a Citizen of Oz and a Shiz University student and a super fancy ballroom guest, the Citizen of Munchkin Land and things like that. It's not difficult knowing so many little parts. We call it a track, and that's just sort of my part. I sort of look at it as one part, and Glinda as another part. The swing job is, I think, the hardest job on Broadway. They have to know like 7 or 8 different tracks and go on for them all the time. Like, could be a 2-show day and they play one track in the first show and another track in the second show. And the dancer swings often go on in the middle of a show. They'll be in one track and they have to switch. And I think that takes a special sort of person to be able to switch gears like that and remember all of that information. But 2 parts, I can do.
I am a swing and an understudy at Wicked. I guess I'm considered the singer swing. There are, I think, 12 men ensemble in the show, and I cover basically all of them except the real dancers. There's up to 8 guys that I go on for, and then plus I understudy the Wizard and Dr. Dillerman. So there's 10 tracks total that I've been on for, or could be on for at any notice. I've always been a bit of a perfectionist my whole life, and I think that sort of lends itself well to being a swing, though it sometimes can be like 18 months between times I go on for a certain track. So that can be a little nerve-wracking, but, you know, that's part of the gig. Me, 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 me. Lulu, Lulu, Lulu. I've been with the show in various forms, always as a swing. Since 2007, I started in the original LA company, and I first came to Broadway in 2008. And so my first 6 months with the show in LA in particular were very stressful. My heart would go into my throat pretty much whenever the phone would ring about an hour before a half hour, because that was usually, oh, you're on for something, and I just didn't have it in my head yet. But now that I've been with the show for a long time and been thrown into lots of situations, it's calmer now. So I have a much stronger sense now of knowing what needs to happen in order to make the show work in whatever slot that I'm in.
I love being a standby. It's kind of the best of both worlds. Sometimes I have the opportunity to watch the show, and then sometimes I have the opportunity to be in the show. My job is to come to the theater and be ready at the drop of a hat to go on for the role of Glinda. Sometimes I'll know if there's a vacation that the Glinda is taking, and I'll know that I have the time, you know, a week of shows, and sometimes I don't know at all. It could be in the middle of the show, which has happened before, or it could not be for 3 weeks. I get asked that question a lot, you know, how often do you get to perform? And there really is no like standard, typical answer. It's different anytime. Last week, I was on as Glinda. It was a blast. It's always fun riding in the bubble. It's the best mode of transportation. I was sitting in this dressing room, it was a few weeks ago. We had just gotten the call for intermission. My cell phone rang and an announcement happened at the same time. You know, Tiffany, please come to the Glinda dressing room immediately. And I ended up being on in the middle of the show. I think she became ill. And that happens, you know, it's real life. I ran downstairs and the wig department had my wig ready, and we were ready for action very quickly. I'd say I think that happened easily in 6 to 7 minutes. Thanks.
It's a little difficult keeping up with Glinda's material because I do it so rarely. We have rehearsal here, but that is one big part of my job, is to maintain that by myself. So I sort of have to take the initiative to make sure I know the lines and the lyrics and the music and the blocking and the choreography, so that when I do need to go on, I'm not a mess. Yes, I have this notebook that has my understudy notes, because Wicked changes a little bit all the time. They love to keep it fresh, and they open new companies, and they are just always changing little tiny things in Wicked. And even though it's been open for 10 years now, it's a totally different show from one day to the next or 1 month to the next. So we'll have understudy rehearsal, and I take notes. And so if I find out I'm going to be Glinda, the first thing I do is open this and see what changed and what kind of notes I got from last week's rehearsal. The notes I get are from any number of people, but mostly the dance captains, the stage manager, or the associate director, any of those people that are the boss of me. To tell you the truth, a lot of it is, we told you this before and you're still not doing it. Or you forgot, or you're not following directions. But a lot of reminders about the character and why she does the things she does, and choices that I make as Glinda. It's cool, though, because I can sort of play around with it. I've been doing it for so long that it's been a fun journey, and it's probably 100% different when I go on for Glinda now than it was when I started. It's usually pretty spread out in between when I go on. I would say like 4 or 5 times a year. I really like to play Glinda. It's fun, but it's also a little stressful because it's a big responsibility. Everybody knows that character is supposed to be funny, so they're waiting to see how funny you are, which is kind of daunting.
Looking at these, I should write more in pencil. Every swing sort of has their own system. I have my little Bible here, which has all my track sheets in it, and so they're marked out per person. They're named at the top. Often they're named by someone who isn't actually still here, because there's been, I'll cover people, there's a lot of turnover over the years, and so I might have somebody that their name is on the track, but they actually were in the show 5 years ago. I just haven't updated it. But we also have changes that happen now and again, where they'll shift things, and so then I have things crossed out, rewritten in my chicken scratch. So, I mean, there's a little bit of constant vigilance, but I've been with the show long enough now that things are pretty securely in my brain.
The show is going to start in a few minutes, and when the curtain comes up, I'll be in my place for places.
Sometimes not being on stage all the time, of course, can be frustrating, because that's the reason that I'm in this business and chose this career. I love to be on stage. So of course you can get a little bit anxious. But I'm thrilled to be here, and so I completely indulge and, you know, sit into those moments when I actually do have the opportunity to be on stage. I first toured as Glinda and then came here. As you can hear the show playing right now, I come to the theater. I have my own dressing room where I kind of sit, have my own space. I can listen to the show, what's going on, and I also will watch the show either from the house or from the stage manager's office. There's a big TV screen there. And it's like regular upkeep. I have weekly voice lessons, and sometimes we rehearse during the show up in our rehearsal room so that we're always ready, myself, the other standby, understudies, swings, so that we're all ready to go on stage at the drop of a hat. Hi.
With your turkey polka dots.
How are you? The main thing that we'll do together is tune in with the show in the office, watch the monitor, because I could be going on in 3 minutes.
It is a case. Yep.
Now let's reflect one another. Love each other. You're perfect. We're perfect.
It's so easy to play opposite Kyle Dean Massey. He is gorgeous.
Either stage management office or in the green room, we have monitors that I can see certain things if I have a question about spacing or traffic patterns of who goes where in a number of something shifted, that kind of thing.
Hey, Leash, you know how that light spans 0 to 8? I didn't realize that until I just saw that. Like, I can use that whole thing.
We have 3 things. We hit 8, center, and 8, and I just wanted to make sure that that was what was happening and that my brain was accurate, which it was, thankfully. We've had a couple of instances where something has happened mid-show, and you just kind of, you click into a way of your brain working that it's like, okay, what needs to happen? I need to cover this, you need to cover that. Let's go, and you sort of get instinctual.
Thank you. He's not even going to be here.
Kind of like the sweet spot is like 0 to 6.
Isn't it wonderful? Bob was too shy to ask me at first, but once Glinda encouraged him, don't.
Whenever you have all that stuff can be sharper, and sometimes with Kristin it goes gaga. The heads go slightly different.
Oh, really?
So, yeah, to make sure, I think it's more her.
Okay.
To make sure it's really on the downbeat.
Okay. Great. Thanks. Okay. No, that's great. You mean I'm not perfect?
No, it is perfect.
Yay!
You need to have a thick skin, I think, in knowing that sometimes you're going to be not totally right and someone's going to tell you that something needs to be different, and that's okay. That's just how things are. As stressed as you get, you have to maintain, or it helps to maintain, a calm exterior, because your emotions can get in the way if you're too freaked out. So those are all important things to look for as far as a skill set and a temperament.
Who knew? Again, one of the things as a stage manager, understudies can be incredibly important to your day-to-day living. With whatever problems you may have, understudies are there to solve them. Yes? Now, there's a difference between an understudy and a swing. A swing is a person who has typically will go on 2 or 3 times a week for a role. Yes? There was once a production, a tour of Chorus Line, and Donna McKechnie had originated the role on Broadway, and she was in her late 30s, so she was the name above the title, but she only performed opening night. The rest of the run was done by her swing. So it was sort of dishonest in that sense. But a swing is very specific to a role. A normal understudy will have a variety. There'll be the male understudy, the female understudy. And so, for instance, if the swing is also in the chorus, then the understudy would go to the chorus role while the swing did the role on stage. So again, just some titles. There's also these people called standbys who are not in the show, but are there in case an extra body is needed. Yes, and so, again, I would say the swing is the one who is the direct understudy. The understudy in general would be the person to replace the swing, and the standby would be the person to replace the understudy if you were having to move things up for an evening performance. If you have to do that, just so you know, equity says you have to tell the audience in 2 of the 3 ways you can tell an audience. One is make an announcement for the show, and a lot of times at intermission, people will get sick at intermission, and so again, you have to have someone, that'd be you, but someone needs to go on and say, this role will now be played by this person. That's really the only way you can tell people if it happens at intermission. But the other 2 ways are have a sign in the lobby saying the role of, Cassie will be played by this person tonight instead of Don McKechnie. And the third way is to have a little insert in the programs. And if you go to Broadway, I swear to you, you're gonna have 13, 14 inserts, especially if you go on a Wednesday matinee. You're gonna see all these swings and all the understudies. Cool, just so you know. But again, those are equity rules. When people leave, you need to have a buddy system. And again, the first rehearsal is the best time to set it up, so that you can have people going to the car safely, securely. Again, depending on your parking lot's information or situation, if you've got a parking garage that's connected to the theater, it may not be as important, but still, crazy things happen. So just create some sort of buddy system to get people out and home safely. Cool. All right, so you've made the first rehearsal. Congratulations. And we'll talk about how to handle blocking next time. See you then.